Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath, the last game to be developed by Oddworld inhabitants before they took a very long hiatus from the video game industry, and it's probably their best game so far.
Stranger's Wrath was met with very high critical acclaim by critics and gamers alike. However, the game sold very poorly due to lack of marketing. Lauren Lanning said, and I'm quoting him on this, "The game wasn't advertised or marketed because Electronic Arts couldn't get its PlayStation 2 port of our Xbox original to run. And if EA isn't on all SKUs, it just won't promote the game." And then he went on to say, and again I'm quoting him here, "It was very disheartening to us that we could have a title with a user metric of 9.6 out of 10. A game that was praised as being a fusion of filmmaking and video games in terms of being less gamey and more story and character driven. And then to see that the largest publisher in the industry had no interest in marketing it regardless of how innovative it was." A few years later, Lanning had said that EA sabotaged Stranger's Wrath by not investing more marketing into it, and that no matter how good a game can be, its fate is decided by the publisher's marketing commitment. However, Stranger's Wrath saw success when it was remastered for the PS3 and Vita, which proved Lanning correct as the HD re-release proved highly successful as it was advertised.
And it doesn't end there. Not by a long shot, and what I'm about to say is why we haven't seen a new Oddworld game in quite some time.
After Stranger's Wrath, Lanning was left with a very cynical view of the relationship between developers and publishers, and learned that when big publishers invest in an intellectual property that they don't want a single person to own it, which led to new agreements between publisher and developer where before you know what titles are coming out from that studio, if the game has great success, the publisher has the clause to buy the company at the value before the game's success. Lanning did not want to have any part of those deals because he believed this model would see the development studios divided like Solomon's baby, where each corporate faction that had a stake in the studio would claim ownership and then take a slice of it, leaving the original studio destroyed. EA did offer to buy Oddworld inhabitants, but Lanning would not allow it to happen, as he saw it as more of a hostile takeover rather than a smart business decision. Lanning sees the Oddworld intellectual property as his child, and did not want it to be owned by a company that did not share his views on how to treat it and severed all ties with EA.
And because Lanning ditched EA, no publisher means no funding for a game, so Oddworld had closed their doors. And I'm not going to say it was a bad idea because I kind of agree with it.
Lauren Lanning is a passionate game designer. He and his company designed this world and characters that feel real. They put their heart and soul into everything, and I share that belief. I had started working on my own game a long time ago. Granted, I never got past the conceptual stages for a lot of reasons, but I wouldn't want some company owning the intellectual property that I created. That's why I get so passionate when I see a good franchise being treated poorly, because I see that intellectual property as a labor of love and should be treated as such. There is a lot more that happened to Oddworld inhabitants after Stranger's Wrath, but as I said in the Apes Odyssey and Exodus review, the video would be too long if I did go into the whole history. Stranger's Wrath was intended to be a sequel to Munch's Odyssey, but they changed it around as many games do during development. This is also not part of the Oddworld quintology. Today, only 2 of the 5 games that were planned were made, Abe's Odyssey and Munch's Odyssey being those 2.
The third game in the Oddworld quintology is supposed to be Oddworld Squeak's Odyssey, and according to Lanning, it's a really messed up story, and given how the Oddworld games are, that's saying something.
The graphics are really good, but I am playing the HD re-release on the PC, so it does look amazing. The game still looks like an Oddworld game, there's no doubt about that, as the creatures and characters look pretty bizarre. If you've played the other Oddworld games, you'll notice a pattern when it comes to the planet Oddworld. Oddworld is a very dry planet. Lanning has confirmed that Oddworld's land surface area is 10 times greater than Earth, and with Earth being a mostly water planet, that should give you an idea of what Oddworld would be like. However, there is conflicting data that says that Oddworld is 7 to 10 times bigger than Earth, and pictures of Oddworld show it to have a lot of water. The character designs don't feel very Oddworld, but this game does take place on Western Mudos, one of the continents of Oddworld, while the previous 3 games took place on Eastern Mudos. The voice acting is what really clinches that level of immersion for me. All the characters have these exaggerated southern accents, and combined with this Old West looking environment, the game is very much like a movie set in the Old West. And very much like movies based in the Old West, an unnamed hero is usually referred to as Stranger when he arrives into town.
I'm not sure if this is intentional or not, but Stranger's voice and mannerisms remind me of the main character from Sling Blade, which I find a little odd because Stranger looks more like a Clint Eastwood type of character.
Stranger's Wrath has a couple of different gameplay elements working together in perfect harmony. It's an action platform game and smoothly transitions to a first-person shooter, and there's some stealth elements to it as you can hide in tall grass. Because there's a first and third person perspective, the combat changes depending on what mode you're in. If you're in the third person point of view, you can use a spinning punch or kick, and you'll have to hit enemies a few times before they're knocked down. When they're knocked down, you can bounty them for money. You get more money if you bounty the enemies alive, so you want to knock them out, not kill them. Although there are instances where enemies will be killed, but they drop money anyway. In the first person perspective, you can use Stranger's double-barreled crossbow where you can use live ammo. And that's not a euphemism either, the ammunition is literally alive. You can use Zapflies to stun an enemy and can open electrical circuits, and you never run out of them. Fuzzles do a moderate amount of damage and can be used for setting up traps. Stunks will cause your enemies to puke so you can bounty them at that time. Chipmunks will lure enemies to wherever you fire them. Bolemites will wrap enemies up in a web, making capture very easy. Thud slugs do very heavy damage and will knock an enemy out. Sting bees do a moderate amount of damage and are rapid fire. And finally, boom bats do massive splash damage.
I find the live ammo aspect to be kind of annoying. You can't just walk over and pick them up. First, you gotta shoot them to knock them out, then walk over and pick them up. It's not bad, just, like I said, a little annoying.
I recommend finding Thud Slugs and Bolemites as they will make the game incredibly easy, but they won't be available in all places. There are various ways you can play the game. You can use all the utility types of ammo, like setting fuzzle traps and using chipmunks to pick off your enemies one by one, or you can go in guns blazing and kill everything in sight, which is really not a good idea as you will die very quickly as it takes several hits to down a single enemy. Combat in general is more strategy based due to the nature of the ammunition you get. In terms of difficulty, I find the game to spike at certain points, like the fourth boss who raids the first town to free his relative that was captured at the start of the game. His weapon hits really hard and he has a pack of minions too. When you take the fifth bounty, if you don't have a strategy guide or look it up, you're going to be screwed. Up until now, the boss fights have been a group of minions that you take out before you get to the boss. Not here. You have to distract the minions and make your way to a switch to activate it, then go up an elevator to meet the boss. Then you distract her with fuzzles, hit a switch up there, climb along a rope, corner her, and pummel her into defeat. The fight with the actual boss is easy, but getting to her is a pain as the elevator is guarded.
After that, the difficulty just plummets, and I don't mean at a slant, I mean straight down. But then later on in the game, the difficulty spikes up again.
There's a total of 12 bounties for you to collect, but after that the game isn't over. You're only about 2/3 of the way finished. When I completed the 7th bounty and took the 8th, I was 4 hours into the game and it felt like I've been playing it for at least 8 hours. The game is about 10 hours total, but it feels much longer. I don't know if I want to say that's a good or a bad thing, so that's up for you to decide. The story is pretty good and they do something different, although they do shoehorn in that anti-capitalist message that the Oddworld games are known for. I say that it's shoehorned in because it doesn't come in towards the end. You play as Stranger, a bounty hunter that needs a life-saving operation, so he goes around Mongo Valley collecting bounties on outlaws. It gives some of that mysticism versus technology by explaining that the species known as grubs worshipped a creature known as a steef, a creature with 4 legs, a gorilla-like body, and a head of a lion with horns.
Then they show you a very detailed statue of what a Steve looks like, and it looks like Stranger. So when it's revealed that Stranger is a Steve, you're just like, saw it coming.
If you haven't played Sly 4, skip to this point in time in the video to avoid a spoiler. This feels just like the Penelope betrayal in Sly 4, in the sense that you see it coming because the story hints at it early in the game. So when they do reveal it, you're not surprised by it. Anyway, you're told through the story that a Steef protected the grubs but were hunted to near extinction by the industrial races of Oddworld. That Steef was possessed by a demon and stole the water from the grubs. After you finish the 12 bounties, Stranger is captured and revealed to be a Steef, so there's no surprise. And Stranger is now the one being hunted. That life-saving operation was to fuse his 2 legs together to hide his true species. You find out that something called Setco Demon is a guy called Setco who runs a bottled water company and built a dam that cut the water off from the grubs. So Setco is the demon-possessed Steef that stole the water, but Setco isn't a demon. It's a parasite latched onto a Steef's head.
It's not a bad story, in fact, it's really good. They just drop too many obvious hints, so when these dramatic reveals happen, it's just confirming what you've already figured out.
I really enjoyed the story, but if they'd built up the Steef more and waited until much later to reveal that Stranger was a Steef and not show that statue, it would have been a much better surprise. It's just a matter of really big hints that they drop throughout the game, and all the mysticism that was built up is all smoke and mirrors. The game gives an interpretation of previous events through the grub's perspective of magic and supernatural occurrences, but then gives an actual real world, well in the terms of this game series anyway, explanation to the events that actually transpired. And now that I think about it, maybe that's the actual reveal. Abe's Odyssey and Exodus had all these mystical elements that were used throughout the game to beat the bad guys. In Stranger's Wrath, it plays on those mystical elements that we're familiar with, but then reveals that there are no mystical elements.
And if that's really the twist to the story, then I'm gonna take back what I said about the obvious hints, because that's just writing genius right there.
If the intention was to mislead the player by dropping the obvious hints that are based on the mystical elements of Oddworld that the player is familiar with, and then turn around and say that there really are no mystical elements in this game, which renders the hints moot because they were red herrings, that's a pretty genius idea. It's a very well done story with really good gameplay with great controls. In terms of age, I can't actually gauge this one correctly as the HD version is more of a remake. I played the original Xbox One many years ago at one of those LAN gaming centers and I don't remember it that well. The HD one is the one that I was given to review, so it's the only one I have to go off of. One complaint that I do have, and I believe this has to do with the PC version, which is the one that I'm playing, Stranger will sometimes get stuck in the third-person perspective and won't move forward and will only spin in circles. This happens a lot when using the keyboard controls, but not as much with an actual controller, so the PS3 version might be your best course of action if you want to try it out.
All in all, Stranger's Wrath is the best game to come out of Oddworld Inhabitants. It's definitely one of those games that you have to play at some point in your life.